Good morning, Galaxians, and welcome to another live edition of the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and I'm going to be your host. Initially, I didn't have anything specific planned to cover today, but then I got an email Monday evening from a viewer with a question, a topic that comes up pretty regularly about listings on eBay that disappear without warning, and another video that she had watched from another YouTuber that kind of addressed it, and I had some questions about it. So I thought we would go over that this morning and talk about this phenomenon and kind of eBay more broadly about some of the issues that are going on over there. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Of course, before we jump into that, let's get into the chat. Miss Lachey, good morning. Welcome. Happy hump day to everyone. Absolutely. I'm going to have to blow this up. I cannot read these names. Tom, is that Kozar? First live. Thank you. Appreciate you coming out. We've got Big Dre in the house today. Good morning. Let me continue to tweak this. Goodness. Midget Gordon Ramsay. First time I've managed to get in right at the beginning. Welcome. Thanks for coming by. Lord Jake Ryan, as always, good morning. Never Too Old, good morning. I don't think I've seen that name here before either. Thank you very much. Den Decor Depot, good morning. eBay iOS app, got to refresh. USPS is not doing evening pickups at my local post office anymore. Interesting. The Postal Service, to be fair, it's a mess. And you may have seen, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, that Louis DeJoy had announced that he was going to be leaving, and he asked the USPS Board of Directors, Board of Governors, to find his replacement. Then this past Monday, he further gave notice that that was going to be his last day, and he is gone. So the post office obviously is in a big state of flux. Obviously, he's not a real popular character. He did a lot of things that have, at least in the short and medium term, had negative impacts on the Postal Service and the service that they're delivering. But his departure throws all of that kind of into flux, because now you've got somebody that's going to try to come in midway through this, whatever his terminology was for it, delivering for America plan. And it's not their plan, and whoever this person is, he or she is going to have to find some way to either continue to move down that path or to take the necessary corrective actions without further degrading the service. So, while I don't think there's any tears being shed about him leaving, it does present some problems potentially for the post office moving forward, again, probably in that short to medium term. Notwithstanding all the discussion about privatizing it and all the rest of that. Media Picker, hello. Curious if anyone went to Missouri to visit the girl who messaged from the last video. Good question. Let me know in the chat how that went, if you did. Den Decor Depot says they want full trucks is the excuse. I've had to file 4 mail searches in the past 2 weeks. It's a mess, and I don't have good local FedEx UPS drop anymore. Yeah, trying to use alternative services can be difficult because they're not as obviously ubiquitous as the United States Postal Service. Again, depending on who you talk to, there are varying levels of service from them as well. I'm currently also dealing with one missing package. Unfortunately, it hasn't been missing all that long, but I don't have a result yet from the post office. But eBay, in their infinite wisdom, has already refunded the customer. And even though I had a search open and had been in contact with the customer, I got a ding on my service metrics for a case solved without buyer resolution. And I'm like, I'm working on it. I'm trying to find the package right now. Why are you resolving this not even 2 weeks after the item shipped? And I can't get a response from eBay. So there you go. That's what's going on over there. Let's get into this question that came up. Let me switch my screens here real quick so we can get into this. So this was an email that I received. And as always, if you have questions, if you're here live, you can leave them in the chat. You can DM me over on Instagram at Galaxy CDs Rocks, or you can always email me as well, galaxycds@gmail.com. So this message, good evening, Ryan. I was watching a video from Don, the auction professor, and he was talking about some listing of his that disappeared from his store. This is something that people talk about pretty regularly, listings just randomly disappearing. When he talked to eBay, Multiple reps told him that they take down listings that are older than 2 years. He also talked about ending and selling similar all his listings over time, so nothing is really older than a year. He narrates the story better, so there was a link in this email to the particular video. My question for you is, since you have probably the equivalent number of listings as him, and you don't end and sell similar, have you had any issues with disappearing listings? I'm a long way from that number of listings, but I was curious about your experience with any of this. So, I have talked on this show before about the fact that I have not, to my knowledge, experienced an issue with listings disappearing. It's just not something that has occurred for me. I know sellers that have had that happen. I've talked about how I kind of monitor my active listing totals, and I can see if I'm at 11,300 today and I list 15 and I sell 10 and the number matches what it should be, and it has consistently done so over the 5+ years I've been doing this, that I've not had anything disappear. So when I got this message, I thought, let's just go back and look. I was really curious about the 2-year deletion thing. So I went and took a peek, and I don't know if you can see. It's going to be tough to see, probably, especially if you're watching this on a phone. But I pulled up on my mobile my current listings, and I did my active listings, and I sorted them by oldest to newest. And there are the first 2 listings that come up were a couple of CDs that were listed according to eBay 2,027 days ago, which is 5.5 years. So what does that mean? What does that tell us about whether eBay is in fact deleting listings over 2 years old? How are they doing it? What's the criteria? Clearly, it is not all listings over 2 years old, because here are 2 listings that I can remember listing in August of 2019 when I decided to start dabbling part-time in reselling. I had some CDs that were left from my CD store, and I thought, this is a perfect place to start. I've got this inventory sitting around. It's several hundred pieces. They're just in my basement. Let's start with these. So I can remember listing these items sitting at my computer desk. Nothing fancy, no photo booth, just did it on my phone. You can see the keyboard. I wasn't real cautious about even what these photographs looked like. And I did these listings, and here they are 5.5 years later, and they're still active, and they still come up in search. I searched both of these myself to make sure they were still good and findable on eBay, and they are. So what's going on here? I know a lot of sellers talk about the end and sell similar thing that they do with their listings so that they keep them active and that eBay ultimately does not delete them. I don't do that, and my listings don't appear to be disappearing. I do, however, run sales. I've talked about my promotional strategy. So anything in my shop 366 days or older goes on sale every month. So every 30 to 40 days, these listings, these older listings, are getting some kind of activity from me through putting them into some sort of sale campaign through the marketing tab. I don't know. eBay, if you're listening, does that trigger the algorithm so that these listings don't get disappeared? Or is there something else going on? Or were those reps simply selling Don, the auction professor, a line of nonsense to just make him go away and say, yeah, that's a thing. We just delete listings older than 2 years old, when clearly that's not happening, or at least it's not happening consistently, which leads kind of to the bigger conversation about eBay at large, is the number of things, and we talk about it all the time in these lives and in the regular podcast, where different sellers have completely different experiences on eBay with things being deleted or removed, things happening to their listings, to their sales, to their business policies, to whatever, that are then not occurring with other sellers. And it makes it incredibly difficult as an individual seller to know what you should do to make sure that your listings stay active, that they're available, that they're searchable, that they can be found, that your promotions are running like they're supposed to. Because of that inconsistency, there's no way to know, do I have to end and sell similar every year, every 2 years, like Don apparently is? What is the amount of time that Don and his team are spending, and you could make the argument wasting, doing and sell similar on potentially thousands of listings a year if they don't have to? Why is my experience as another seller with 11,000 plus listings so different from Don's? I have never ended and sold similar any of my listings. I rarely, if ever, even go back in and edit a listing unless a potential buyer reaches out to tell me that they found some kind of mistake or whatever in my listing, and I'll go back and correct it. But I don't do anything other than to run these things on sale. And yet, as far as I can tell, I've never had anything removed by eBay, never had a listing go missing. I know a lot of sellers approach this in different ways from that end and sell similar. I believe Shed Flips, Lonnie, and Candace started a project several months ago where they're going through a certain number of bins every week to verify that all the items that are in that bin are in fact still active on eBay. That may be a good suggestion as well. Again, it's not something I've done because my numbers seem to match up on a day-to-day basis. So I don't, other than at the end of February, where you have that temporary glitch where your listing numbers get all funky, I've not seen any problems with it. So this is a really interesting phenomenon. The short answer to the question is eBay deleting listings? Yes, clearly for some sellers they are, but it's not consistent across the board. It's not happening to all sellers. It's not happening with any kind of regularity that you could pin your pin your business on, that you would feel confident that it's happening all the time and with every listing. So it's a very strange phenomenon. Let me know in the chat, and I see the chat has been blowing up. So we'll get back into that and kind of see what you think of that. But it's one of those things. It's clearly occurring for some sellers, but not all, which makes it incredibly difficult, like I said, for you or I as an individual seller to know what to do. And it also makes it quite difficult for people like Don or myself or any of the people that have a podcast or a YouTube channel to try to help other sellers perform better on these platforms, because there's no consistency. I can't tell you with any certainty, and neither can Don or anybody else, what you should do to make sure this doesn't happen to you. Will end and sell similar be 100% effective? I don't know. Do you know? Does anybody know? Does eBay even know? And again, that would be my question to the eBay reps. Was that we delete listings after 2 years just something to make Don go away so that they don't have to dig deeper into this phenomenon about what is going on? It is, unfortunately, it is a big, big mess that I don't see being resolved anytime soon, but clearly you need to do something to keep an eye on your listings to make sure that they are, in fact, all still live. So let's get back here into the chat and see if I can find where I was. Major Win, good morning. Thanks for coming out. Then Decor Depot with a hello, more hellos. Mel Flips It, good morning, welcome. Seeing you twice in 2 days. Mel showed up at my Whatnot show yesterday, purchased a couple of children's books. Thank you very much. Mel says, I do post office drop-off to make sure it gets scanned. I do the same thing. I go to the post office 6 days a week in the morning. I go to my warehouse, I pick my items, prepare them for shipment, go to the post office with my scan sheet, always get a receipt for that scan sheet, and that eliminates probably 99.9% of the problems. Again, I've got one issue currently outstanding, but I'm one of those trust but verify. I always get a receipt. Recommerce Dave, good morning. Good to see you from the land down under. Where's my socks? Don't rely on the eBay reps responses. Many times they are not correct. And that to me also is super baffling. How I get not everybody's going to know everything. But again, with the inconsistency of performance, you can talk to 2 or 3 or 4 eBay reps and get 2 or 3 or 4 different responses to the same issue or problem. And that to me just doesn't seem right. It should not be that way. I get that the platform is huge and that there are things that happen randomly, as is the case with any technology, something just randomly comes up that they're not accustomed to, and they've got maybe a canned answer, but they don't all even have the same canned answer to give you when you call with an issue. Den Decor says, I've found listings drop when I do inventory. Sometimes it's my fault. Sometimes I have no idea, but 2,000 days do an end, sell similar, and see if it sells in a week. And there's a lot of sellers that talk about that, not only from avoiding listings disappearing, but to trigger the algorithm, because obviously when you do a sell similar, it counts as a new listing. You get that short-term new listing bump where it will put it at the top of the search for that particular item as a quote unquote best match, and it even says new listing on it because I checked one of mine yesterday. So there are plenty of reasons potentially to do and sell similar beyond just losing quote unquote items in your listings that a lot of sellers swear by. Again, I don't do that. I run all those items on sale, and probably half or more of my sales every month come from items that are older than a year old, in some cases that are up to 5 years old, that are now on sale for whatever this month. They're all 25% off. So Tom Kozar, inconsistency at eBay is a feature, not a bug. Absolutely. Den Decor says, here's a question for you. What is the fastest you've ever sold something on eBay? I sold a Pepsi wall mount bottle opener. I paid a quarter for $25, and I saw comps in the $70 to $80 range. How quickly did that sell? I've had stuff sell generally within 24 hours. Not a ton, but I've had a few, and that does always get your hackles up a little bit. You're like, did I price it too low? Or why did this sell so quickly? I just did that actually yesterday. I listed a book called Serendipity from the 1960s. Comps were $4.99 to $6.99. I listed mine, I think, at $5.99. I got an offer of $5 within like 8 hours of listing it, and I sold it. So it's not a big sale. It's not something that appeared to be highly in demand. I just happened to catch somebody was interested in that the day I listed it. Mine probably showed up at the top of the listings because it was a new listing. It was priced well. I had a dozen pictures of it. I had a good description, and I got an offer on it and sold essentially right away. So it can happen really quickly, but it does always make you wonder, did I make a mistake here? Did I miss, was this a first printing and I missed it and it's worth a bunch of money? Or, did I just misread the comps? What went wrong here that this thing sold that fast? But sometimes it just happens. Mel says, what do you mean new listings drop? I had a new listing drop once. I think it was my error though. And again, eBay is unfortunately just glitchy. Listings go up and they just vanish for some people. And there's no explanation, certainly from us from the outside, and doesn't appear to be one from eBay as well. Playroom says, I'm never going to promote or buy anything from a promoter. It seems like cheating. There's my 2 cents. As you all know, I promote. I do 2 strategies. My old items are just on sale, and everything is promoted. As I've talked about here, probably 60% of my sales are at least credited by eBay to a promoted listing campaign. There's no way really for me to verify whether that's in fact true or not. I hate to be like, whatever, that doubting of the statistics that eBay provides, but that seems like a really big number. When I'm searching for comps, I really don't look to see if the listing is promoted or not. All I'm looking for is pricing information and the quality of the item and the quality of the listing. Whether it's a sponsored promoted listing or not doesn't really impact my research as a seller. As a buyer, I don't really buy a ton, to be fair, on eBay. Assuming that sponsored listing, that promoted listing, is still the right item at the right price and is the right quality, I probably myself would not buy it just because it was a promoted listing. I get where a lot of people just feel like, why are we spending extra to get eBay to do the thing that they're supposed to be doing for us anyway, which is surfacing our listings to potential buyers. The short answer is, unfortunately, that eBay has set up their growth strategy to do more gross merchandise volume by increasing their advertising revenue, and the various promoted schemes that they have set up appear to be their primary driver for that growth. And if you're not playing by by those set of rules, you are potentially missing out on some opportunities. I get why you wouldn't want to do it. I hate paying an extra 7% or whatever to eBay every time I sell something, or 60% of the times I sell something, I guess. But I want those listings to surface. I do want them to sell. I talked about it in the video I did a couple of years ago when I started doing promoted listings. My sales almost immediately increased by about a third. So for me, it has been a profitable thing to do. But I certainly, I said at the time, a pretty significant portion of those items most likely would have sold anyway. So it's not all gravy, unfortunately. But yeah, I absolutely get why people don't want to do it. Big Dre liquidated 4 totes of books at Half Price Books. They paid me $27, but I'm glad they're gone, and I'm already using the empty space it created in my storage unit. Yeah, you got to know when to say when and get rid of stuff. I think Max, when he was here in the chat last week, mentioned some of the online sites that will buy kind of your chaff, the older books that you don't want to mess with. As I've talked about here pretty regularly, I donate some to, especially if they're religious books, to a local thrift store that is a Christian-based thrift store. I supply several of those little library kiosks in the neighborhood with books, especially with children's books. So there are ways to kind of get rid of some of that kind of dead inventory. But yes, you've got to clear that stuff out, take the hit, and move on. Half Price Books. The last time I tried to take anything to Half Price Books, I think I had maybe 100 or 150 books. They offered me $5. The time after that I stopped by over there because I happened to be at the UPS store, which is right next door. They had a big sign in the door that they weren't even buying books or CDs. And I'm like, how do you do that? That's your entire mission, is to buy used goods and then sell them. But there you go. Den Decor says, to Mel, when I go through a shelf, there will be items that aren't on eBay, but it will be in Vendu. So see, there you go. There's a case where it obviously has paid off for you to double check a box or a bin or a shelf. Whenever you're there, take 5 minutes and go through it and see, are all these items actually still in here? On the few occasions where I've done that, where I'll just randomly grab an item out of a box just to double check it, I've not come across anything that was not still active. How would that be your error? You didn't enter, or what happened? Recommerce Dave, do you have the inventory flag on for your store? I believe listings don't get deleted with this flag on. I do not. That's an interesting take there as well. I don't use that tag, but that's interesting. Again, this goes back to my original point. The problem is that nobody knows. And if you call eBay, you won't get consistent answers, which indicates it to me that eBay probably doesn't know either. And that, again, that's a huge problem for you as a seller and us as, content creators who are trying to give you good advice and tips on how to run your business, because there's no way to know. Is it that flag? Is it because I'm putting them on sale every month? And does that trigger an algorithm that the seller is aware that this listing is still up and still active and they're doing something? Is it because it gets a certain number of views in a month, a quarter, a year? What's the trigger that might cause it to be deleted, if there is one? Or is it just an error? Is it a glitch? Is it totally random and it's something they haven't been able to figure out how to fix? And so they just tell us something to make us go away when we call and ask those questions. That to me is probably the bigger issue than the fact that the listings are actually disappearing, which that in itself is bad enough. But when you don't know how to fix it, you don't know what to do. You got people that are talking about just within this chat, brand new listings that for some reason have disappeared, let alone ones that are 2, 3, 5 years old. The notion, to continue on a rant here, that eBay would want to delete listings over 2 years old, just on the face of it, doesn't really make any sense to me either. Why would you want to do that? Let's just say, for an example, that I have a particularly rare item. I have the only one listed on eBay. It's very high priced. There's not a ton of demand for it. It may sit there for 2, 3, 4, 5 years before the right buyer might come along and want to buy that item. Why would eBay want to delete that item? And I'm not saying that they would want to specifically delete that individual item, but why would they have a policy or a procedure that automatically deletes, based on some criteria that no one knows, listings that are over 2 years old? It's self-defeating, in my opinion. So that when I read that in that email, that's what representatives had told Don, the auction professor, and I have no reason to doubt that that's probably what they told him. It made no sense to me why you would want to do that. I get maybe you want to just clear up space on your servers. You don't want all those photos and listings of old inactive listings. But my goodness, what if it's again, the example of just that random, super expensive, super rare item, and you've now eliminated any opportunity, not only for the seller to sell it, but for eBay to collect the fees on that sale because you just randomly, arbitrarily deleted listings that were over 2 years old. On the face of it, that doesn't make any sense to me. Den Decor says, my errors are usually multi-quantity listings. I put in one and I had 2 or more. That does happen. And I have heard anecdotally that there are some problems occasionally with multi-quantity listings. The quantity's not updating correctly or accurately, or when there is a problem with the listing, that it resets back to whatever the original amount was. And again, inconsistent across different sellers and different items. But it can cause a problem where whether you know that you put the information in incorrectly or not, eBay is having a problem properly tracking the number of listings that you have in a multi-quantity listing. So Big Dre says, I made a lot of errors this year on eBay. Got a message that my top rated plus status is in jeopardy. Hopefully I can stop making mistakes. It happens. Some of the, like the one I just mentioned, in my case, I've got that now, case closed without seller resolution, despite the fact that I was trying to resolve it. The leeway on that is pretty small. I think it's like 0.3%, and that one error got me to 0.11. So I can only afford one more. Now, to be fair, that's the first case without seller resolution I've ever had in all the years of selling on eBay. And to be fair, I'm still fighting it because it is not without seller resolution. I am trying to resolve it. It just hasn't been resolved yet. And eBay, in my opinion, has jumped the gun to do it. But yes, the tolerance for mistakes on eBay is very, very small for top rated plus sellers, unfortunately. A Major Win asks, how do you arrange your schedule to accomplish your listings? So I've talked about this before. Shameless plug, I do sell planners on Amazon. There are KDP planners. I think there's a link to those listings in my YouTube links, and certainly in my link tree on Instagram. But I've got a daily calendar, and I plot at the beginning of the week. I plot how many listings I want to accomplish in a given week. Usually, if I'm not doing whatnot listings, the number's between 100 and 150. If I'm doing whatnot, I'll add another 40 because I'm generally doing a couple of shows a week and doing 20 listings per show. And then I'll just break that down by day, depending on what else I've got going on. So for instance, Monday, I usually only allot myself a goal of maybe 15 listings to do for that day because I've got a big day in the morning with shipments. I may have 25, 30, 35 shipments to go out, which will take up a pretty significant portion of my morning. Tuesday, I've just started doing whatnot shows in the morning. So I will allow myself maybe 20 or 25 for that day. Wednesday, I do this show, so it's kind of the same thing. Thursday, I'm doing another Whatnot show. Friday, I may have a bigger number if I'm not going out sourcing, but I've got a plan for every day of how many I want to do. Once I've done my shipments for the morning, I come back and I just start grinding out listings, and I will do that until lunchtime, and then I will come back down here after lunch and do however many are left to get to that number, so that the end of the week, I've got that done. I probably spend, I don't know, 25 hours a week, maybe 30, just doing listings, taking the photos, doing the research, assigning the inventory locations and all that stuff. I list essentially Monday through Saturday. I generally don't list on Sunday, but I will do 5 to 10 listings on Saturday morning just as part of a morning routine to keep the algorithm active, because none of us know how it actually works. And that's one of those things that everybody seems to say is a big deal, to do some listings every day. So I'm listing 6 mornings a week and probably 5 afternoons a week to get to my number. But having some kind of plan, knowing where you want to be at the end of the week to achieve your goals in terms of how much you want to sell. Again, depending on what your sell-through rate is, you may have to list 10 things a week. You may have to list 100 or 150 or 2 or 300. It just depends on what your business is like, what your business model is like. For me, that 100 to 150 kind of target is where I need to be to kind of maintain the level of sales that I'm comfortable with in terms of income and the amount of work that I can get done in a given day. And I just plot that out over the course of a week, and I track it every day. I got my little calendar. I've probably shown pictures of it before, where I literally put hash marks on the day until I hit my, whatever it is, 15, 20, 25, 30 for that day. Some days, let's take an example. If I'm selling like a set of books, but I'm selling them individually, so I can do like sell similar. Those listings tend to go a lot faster because a lot of that information is the same. So that'll allow me to maybe get ahead. So there are weeks where I plan to do 120 and I end up doing 140 because I had 10 or 15 books that were part of a set that I was able to knock out very quickly because they were all sell similar. All I had to do was take some new photos, make a couple of quick edits, and boom, that one was done. So sometimes I do more than my goal, but I make sure I never do less. Pamela says, hello from Miami. Go to the post office and UPS and always have packages scanned and always walk away with a receipt. Absolutely. I don't use the kiosk. There isn't one in my location because it's a super, super small little post office, but I don't do that either. I've never scheduled a pickup. Again, I hate to be untrusting, but that to me, I don't want to leave 25 or 30 packages on my porch until the post office shows up to pick them up. The schedule in my neighborhood, I never know. Sometimes the mail runs at 10 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I see her on my porch at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So there's no rhyme or reason. So I just take them to the post office. Plus, it's like half a mile from my house. So Mel says, the Big Dre did that last year because I grew too fast from part-time to full-time as a beginner. Still, I believe in you. We all do, Dre. And that's, again, not to harp on this, I talk about it every week. That's one of the reasons I love doing these shows on Wednesday, is the support that you all show for each other, the tips and tricks and suggestions that you all have for all of us, makes this all worthwhile. I really appreciate the way you guys handle each other. In the chat, operating on eBay, hello. Use the post office in the small town where I work. Anytime it looks like a package is stuck, I report it to the clerk, and when he runs a search on it, it miraculously starts to move. I'm a big user of the online form, the missing parcel form, and almost without fail, within a week or 10 days at the longest, that package then begins to move. This current one that I've got missing is a little bit of a different situation. So the scans show it arriving at the post office, the local delivery post office, at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and then receiving a scan at 9 a.m. out for delivery, expected delivery before 9 p.m., and then it's crickets. There's not another scan after that. My gut instinct is that the item was actually delivered, but it was not scanned by the postal worker who dropped it off. And I'm going to be hosed on that deal because I don't think they'll never find it because they actually delivered it, and they'll never scan it because they've already given it to the customer. So I'm probably at a loss on that one long term, but I did file the form anyway, and we'll see what happens. But yes, getting something going, whether you do it with your local clerk or you fill out the online form, almost always seems to get it delivered. Again, to use my example, assuming that this particular package that is quote unquote missing is not found and does not get a delivery scan, that'll be just the second item out of probably close to 28,000 items across multiple platforms that I've shipped over the last 5+ years that did not ultimately get a scan at its destination. It sucks to have it happen. It was a $30 book. I hate losing the money on that deal. But in the scheme of things, 2 out of 28,000, that's pretty good. It's way better strike rate than eBay has on anything they're doing. Then of course Depot says the bottle opener went in about 5 minutes. Yeah, that's one of those that you probably think, I missed something with that. And I can remember I had one of those once, and it's so hard to tell which ones are. Mine was I don't know if I think you said yours was a Pepsi. Mine was a Coke wall mount bottle opener, and there are so many like replicas out there, and it's very difficult to tell which ones are replicas versus which ones were actually made in the 1920s or 30s, and it's very easy to make a mistake, and somebody who really knows what those things are and what they should look like and what they should be priced comes along and says, oh, here's one for $25. That's wrong. And they buy it. I've got several searches set up for vintage and antique books that I know a particular version of a book should be worth $100 or $120. And occasionally someone will pop up and it's just an old random book, and they'll list it for $5 or $10. And I will try to swoop in there and buy it to resell because it's so undervalued. So that's another tip. If you're not doing that, if you've got items that you know are worth big money, that sometimes you see a random outlier where someone doesn't know what they have. It doesn't always go with someone not knowing what they have and overpricing it. Sometimes they just don't know what they have and they underprice it, and you can get some pretty good opportunities there. I had one this morning, a book I was looking up. There were 2 listings. One was from Thrift Books, no picture, no art, no nothing, real basic description, $10, free shipping. And the other listing had some pictures, was clearly the same book based on the title and the author, and they were asking $144.99. Which one of those is right? Which one should I buy that one from Thrift Books, or should I do some more research? I chose to go over to Abe Books and look up that same book, and I found a whole bunch of them that were selling for $5, $6, $7. So the Thrift Books price is the correct reference. I listed mine for $4.99 or best offer plus shipping and moved on with life. But yeah, there's some random guy with a book listed for $144.99 that he or she will never see. Holidays Lane, some sellers on Etsy were not charged relisting fees in some cases for months or longer. Still available to buy. Etsy is catching up and letting sellers know the bug is fixed and fees will resume. Yes, the fees I believe are going to get charged. I want to say April 1st, maybe. I got that email. I had, wait for it, 164 listings that had fell into this category where there was some kind of glitch, and renewal fees. It sounds like it was just for 1 month that renewal fees were not charged. It may have been for longer. Etsy, to their credit, is not retroactively catching up those fees. The email I got said they're just going to they put those listings into a category where they would not automatically renew. And then on April 1st, if you set them to automatically renew, you would then be charged the 20-cent relisting fee. So that was the email that I got, that they're not going to penalize us, but you are going to get a big hit if you choose to relist them, which I did. In my case, it's 164 listings that I'm going to get hit all at once for that 20 cents. I don't know how long. Some of them appeared to be from as far back as 2023. The renewal dates on them were visible. So when you went in, there was a link provided in the email, and they had moved all of those listings to the top of your current active listings, and they all showed their original renewal dates. And some of mine went clear back to 2023. Some of them were from 2024. So it wasn't even just again, it's a random thing. It wasn't a particular week or series of weeks. It was over the course of a couple of years where just randomly listings were not getting charged their renewal fees. And they are, again, my email didn't indicate they were catching that up. They were just going to stop the auto renewal on those listings unless you reactivated it. And then they would charge you on April 1st. I believe it's April 1st for those listings. Big Dre, thanks for the encouragement. I've been selling for 18 years, but man, I can't believe how many mistakes this year. It has already surpassed all the mistakes from last year. It does seem like it goes like that, doesn't it? If you're a racing fan, they always talk about yellows cause yellows. You make a mistake and things just seem to compound. You just keep making them and making them. It happens. As long as you're taking the time, all of us, everybody's making mistakes probably every day, to learn from that mistake so you don't keep making the same one. That's progress, and I don't think anybody would complain about that. Big Dre says, I'm reaching for ADHD Dave levels over here. Major Win says, Big Dre, you are not alone. See, there you go. None of us are alone. We can absolutely do that. Again, with all the support that we give to each other. Den says, I'm promoting at 9%. I shudder to think what my sales would be without it. Still behind my sell-through I had 2 years ago with double the inventory. I've noticed, and I've talked about it here, like I've reached that equilibrium point. I'm listing that 100 to 140 a week, and across all my platforms, I'm selling roughly 100 to 120 a week. So my listing total is remaining pretty consistent. So I'm not selling more than I was previously. I've just kind of hit that happy medium where I'm maintaining that level of listings. Sales have been, to be fair, inconsistent. January, I was up. February, I was down. This month, I'm up about 10% in sales. And that is with not really doing any whatnot sales this month. So again, kind of a roller coaster. It's hard to pin what's causing it because I'm essentially doing the same process. I'm listing the same types of books and the same numbers of books every week, every month, and the sales performance is inconsistent. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of outside influences right now between the economy and the potential of tariffs and just all of the stuff that's going on that may be causing people to kind of hold on to their money a little bit. So I don't know necessarily that it's anything you or I as sellers could overcome or that the platforms necessarily could overcome. But I agree. As you said, shudder to think what my sales would be if I stopped doing my promoted listings, because I've seen some sellers that have talked about when they stopped doing that, their sales absolutely cratered. Again, 60% of my sales currently are promoted. Would some of those sales continue to come through if I stopped promoting or if I further lowered my promotion percentage? Probably. But if I lose even half of that number, that's going to be a significant drop in sales. And for me, it's one that's worth paying unfortunately, that extra percentage. Mel Flips, it says the fastest sold The Crow and The Castle by Keith Robertson with the dust jacket for $50 in 5 minutes. There were no comps, paid 25 cents. Not mad about it. And we've talked about that a couple of times here in these lives, knowing what you've got in it and what you're going to be happy getting out of it. That book may have been legitimately worth $25, but there were no comps. So you tried it at $50 and sold it. The book may have been worth $70 or $80, but you were happy getting $50 and getting a flip in next to no time because you only had a quarter in it. Knowing your comfort level and how long you're willing to wait, to hold out, to try to get more, or you want to flip it quickly and get the money so that you can buy more inventory. Those are all decisions that we all make. every single day. And that looks to me like a good call. I would be thrilled with $50 from 25 cents. What is an inventory flag? Is that a setting? Was that Recommerce Dave that mentioned that? If you're still here in the chat, maybe you've already answered it and I'm just not to it, but please do so. Patrick Kehoe, that is exactly what I had. I had a rare Boy Scout uniform jacket from 1920, had it listed for years, finally sold for over $1,000. So there you go. And again, another example of something that was old that did not get deleted. So I don't want to call eBay reps liars necessarily, but disingenuous or misinformed perhaps. Or again, maybe there is a policy that listings over 2 years old that meet some criteria for a lack of views or a lack of activity on the part of the seller do get deleted. That information is not, apparently, it's not clear even to eBay, and it's certainly not clear to us as sellers, which leaves us in the position of not knowing, unfortunately, how to handle those. But good for you. That's a nice sale. Recommerce Dave, at an eBay open day over here, they made the comment that a listing that is 9 months or older would be viewed as stale unless you had multi-quantity sales and should be ended and redone. And there you go. There's eBay saying something that my personal selling experience is that's not the case. I sell stuff all the time that is multiple years old, that is on sale, to be fair, in my store. I know they're getting views. Just as an example, this morning, I had 14 items that were eligible to have offers sent out on them. And 6 of the 14 were items that are on sale, which means they were at least 12 months old or older, because I have everything on sale in my store that is 366 days old or older. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old items for me are still getting views, are still attracting attention, are still getting watchers, are still getting offers, and are still selling. So where does eBay get this notion? And again, it's their platform. They should know, but clearly it's not working that way for everyone. And again, maybe the fact that I put those on sale every month is what triggers them to not be stale. I don't know, again, because eBay doesn't make it clear what kinds of activities you or I as a seller should be doing. But Don mentioned, as we talked about at the beginning, based on the email, he's making an effort to end and sell similar listings every year. So once an item gets to about a year, he's going through that process. Should we have to do that? eBay seems to be indicating that, yes, that's something you should probably do. Sellers talk about it all the time, that's something that they do. But there are those of us out here who are not, and it's working for us. So I don't have an answer. I'm just complaining. Mel says the planner is awesome. Use it to keep track of my daily listings and sales ratio. It helps me stay consistent. I've always been a big believer in like writing things down, just knowing how my brain works. This is something that I discovered about myself probably back in middle school. If I had something I wanted to make sure that I did the next day, if I wrote myself a note at night before I went to bed, I could literally throw the note away. Just the act of physically writing it down was enough to trigger in my pea-sized brain that was something that I needed to remember, and I'd wake up in the morning and I would remember that thing. But the act of going through that process, writing down goals, I'm a big believer in that, whether it's in a planner or a calendar or, I was in my early retail management career, I always had a clipboard with a yellow legal pad, and I would see things and I would write things down. We need to do this. We need to do that. You've got to do that. You've got to have some way to help keep yourself on track, because especially in this business, and especially if you're selling on multiple platforms, there's just way too much going on to try to keep track of. It's far too easy to get distracted. You get a message, you get a text, you get a notification of an offer and a sale, and all of a sudden you haven't gotten any listings done because you were distracted by doing these other things. So finding something to help keep you on track is, in my opinion, a must do. Major Win, we have to do about 90 to 100 a week. Yep. So, I mean, we say 90 to 100 a week, and wow, that's a lot. That's a big number. But if you do it over 6 days, it's 15 a day, 16 a day to get to that number. That's very doable. That is not, unless you've got something that is super hard to research or super hard to photograph, it's not that big a day to do 12 to 18 listings. Or if it's something easy like books or media in general, I've had days I've done 50 listings in a day. So it depends on what it is, but absolutely, knowing where you want to be at the end of a week, and then eat that elephant one bite at a time, break it down into a daily, even, half a day, like I did this morning. I got my shipments done. My target for the day is 20. I knew I was doing this show at 11. I said, if I could get 10 listings done this morning before the show, then I'll have to do 10 more in the afternoon. And then I'll see where I'm at on time, whether I want to continue or whether I want to go do a bike ride or read a book or get back to living. But I broke even today's number down into a morning and an afternoon, so I kind of could keep myself on track. So there you go. For what that's worth, Major Win currently looking at logistics because we want to upgrade to 150 a week. And I've shown from the Batcave kind of my assembly line process, finding whatever works for you, a way to have inventory available close to a photo booth where you can do research and take photos and create your listings, and then have a place for them to go to get them to wherever they're going in the warehouse. Whatever that system looks like that is efficient and repeatable for you, the key thing being repeatable. You've got to be able to consistently do it to make it work, to see some kind of increase. That's the way to go. And it's trial and error. I tried multiple different ways of doing listings before I kind of settled on a physical space that allowed me to do things in a way that is efficient. And I've had people on the lives that have watched me do that and say they would never do it that way. And that's totally fine. You've got to find the method that works for you, that you are comfortable doing and can do quickly, efficiently, and repeatedly. And then you'll get to your number. And knowing, importantly, as I just said with goals, knowing what that number is to start helps you do all of that. Because if that number is 50, the process can look totally different than if it's 150 or 250. And so having, when I was in management, we always had a saying, start with the end in mind. Know where you want to go, and then start thinking about how you want to get there, and lay out plans. And it's a trial and error. You may do some experimentation and decide this thing doesn't work. I'm going to have to change that up. But knowing where you want to get to, whether it's a sales goal or a listing goal, I do listing goals because that is a behavior that I can control. I can't control if eBay is busy this week, or if people are looking for the particular books that I happen to have listed among my 11,000 listings. What I can control is how many listings I do and what the quality of those listings are. So those are the behaviors that I focus on, rather than worrying about a bunch of other stuff that is unfortunately totally out of my control. So Recommerce Dave says to Mel, go to settings, selling preferences, multi-quantity listings. Listings stay active when out of stock. Is that only good for multi-quantity listings, or is there a way to put individual single listings into an inventory type system like that as well? I don't do that even with my multi-quantity listings, because I want those all to disappear, because I don't have replenishable items. Mine are all one-offs. Even in the case where, like yesterday, I was going through a box and I had 3 copies of the same exact book. I could have done a multi-quantity listing of that and then done this process, but when they're gone, it's a book I've literally never seen before, so I'm not going to be able to replace it. So I would want that listing to become inactive, to end when the last one sold. Now, as it worked out, those books were all in wildly varying conditions, so it didn't make sense to list them all in one listing. I ended up doing 2 of them individually, and the third one I held out for a whatnot show. But again, it depends on what you have. whether those kind of listings make sense. Mel says scheduled pickups, kiosk, but it doesn't register as same day until the second post office scan. I also like to know my small post office UPS people. Yeah. And again, as it is with estate sellers, having contacts, having networking with those people will pay dividends down the road. If something does go missing or there's a delay, you've got a point of contact that you've established a relationship with that you can talk to and say, hey, this, like I mentioned back in January, I had an entire day's worth of shipments that were dropped off on New Year's Eve that went missing. And because I know very well my local postal rep, and I know his supervisor as well from having gone into this post office for 5+ years, I was able to talk to them and say, hey, this is what's going on. It's an entire day's worth of stuff. They were able to pretty quickly start researching it and found out what happened. Found it was essentially an entire tub, one of those big cardboard, almost like a Gaylord of stuff that had gotten misdirected on its way to Cincinnati and got kind of stuck behind some stuff. They finally found it and were able to get it moving. But had I not had those contacts, I would have had to fill out the missing package form for 20 odd packages to get them all moving. So knowing those people makes big differences. Pamela Reeves, am I the only person who found out that sending almost everything in a poly bag saves a lot on shipping costs? I do almost everything in bubble mailers, unless it is a very expensive item or like a multi-quantity. Like I had somebody ordered 8 books yesterday. Those went in a box. But yeah, reducing the amount of packaging that you can use to the bare minimum that will 100% protect the item, because you obviously want it to get there in good shape, to reduce the size and the weight makes a huge, huge difference in your bottom line in terms of both your selling costs for the buying the mailers themselves and obviously for shipping, because you end up saving weight. Then Decor, the opener was even a 90s replica, just painted versus unpainted. Pamela Reeves, I use the cubic rate on pirate ship on standard boxes. Never an issue as long as it's under 18 by 12 on the biggest dimensions. And I'm the same. I have my pirate ship set up that when I put in the dimensions, it automatically defaults to whatever the cheapest service is. Sometimes it pops up UPS, which I generally don't use because my listings all say United States Postal Service. But I use the Ground Advantage cubic rate and priority cubic rate on a lot of items that are even supposed to be shipping by media mail, because it is cheaper to do on pirate ship. I don't know if eBay shipping is doing the same thing, if it's as effective, because I haven't used eBay shipping, man, probably close to 3 years now. I've been exclusively on pirate ship. But yes, those cubic rates are fantastic. Recommerce Dave says to Mel, technically, yes, by having it on when a sale occurs, it will go to nil quantity. So if you get another identical item, you can change the quantity to 1 and edit any details. And again, like I said, if it's a replenishable item that you know you can get more, that makes absolute perfect sense. For my business, in my case, I almost never know when I'm going to find a particular old vintage book because I'm buying at estate sales or garage sales or, whatever. I'm not doing like a wholesale buying 15 of a widget from a manufacturer or a distributor that I know as I sell through, I can order another 15, which is where that kind of process would make 100% sense. Box in a bag rate, it's official USPS communications as cubic rate is an acceptable alternative to the old priority regional boxes. It even applies occasionally to just poly bags, depending on the size of it. I've seen those go out in that rate. So yeah, it is a fantastic service. It's not something, as far as I know, that's available if you walk up to the counter at the post office, but it can be a huge savings. Recommerce Dave says it saves redoing the complete listing. eBay will delete nil quantity listings after 6 months of no activity. That's helpful as well. Recommerce Dave adds multi-quantity listings that have multiple sales rank higher in search. There were some people complaining the other day about listings showing up in the search view where historically they had shown, right at the top of the listing, how many had sold of a particular item, and that number had been moved further down the page on an active listing, and sellers were rightfully squawking about that because, as you just said, sales items that have multiple sales of a particular listing are going to be more attractive to potential buyers. If I see that your item, you've sold 15 of these, and I see the next person's item and they've not sold any, that gives me confidence to buy from you. Not necessarily that your item is any better, but that number, like we talk about on Whatnot, having more viewers in your show attracts potentially more people to your show because it looks like it's an interesting show. Same thing here. You've sold 15, the other guy hasn't sold any. You become the expert or whatever in that particular item, and I'm more likely to buy yours, all things being equal. So that number can be really important. I don't know if that's been corrected, but I did see where sellers were really complaining about that, the positioning of that quantity sold thing having moved. Then Decor Depot says 10 of the 12 I packed this morning were all promoted. It is what it is. Yep. Mine, I had 14, and I think 9 of them were promoted. So kind of right on my number, about 60%. Big Dre says, my wife just decided to cancel Vendu because sales on Posh and Mercari aren't what they used to be. She's going to try manually cross-listing starting this month. Definitely keep us posted on how that works out. I don't sell on Posh. I agree. Mercari is not, it's not great, unfortunately. I've got one sale there in the last 2 weeks. It's not been good. I use List Perfectly. I cross-post to both Mercari and to Etsy, and I do way more on Etsy than I do on Mercari, but there's no fees to list on Mercari, so I'm not out anything, but 15 or 20 seconds a time to do the cross-listing like I showed a couple of weeks ago on the live. So it's worth it for me to do it that way. But yeah, I absolutely get that sentiment. I've seen a lot of sellers talking about Poshmark really being off. Big Dre says, I'll list with a tablet on eBay and leave the photos in it so she can use them to cross-list. Mel says, to Big Dre, I thought about it, but I need the expense for taxes because my cost of goods is so low. Also, Nifty Knee Auto Posher is adding an Etsy tool. Yeah, again, if you can do it manually and it's not too big of an inconvenience, saving whatever the cost of the software is probably worthwhile. If you're like me and you're doing 100+ listings a week, doing that 100+ listings 3 times as opposed to once, and then using a software tool to make that work, I would spend more time doing it than the $49 a month that I spend on the service. So for me, it's absolutely worthwhile. But yeah, I totally get why people would want to try to do it manually. Big Dre says, thanks. That's good to know. Recommerce Dave says, similarly, variations listings that have multiple sales also rank higher. The algorithm favorably views the sales history as a positive customer experience. And as I mentioned, so do buyers. They see that as kind of affirmation that that particular seller on that particular item is the go-to. And that's why they go there. That's why people go to Amazon first. Amazon has established itself through billions of sales as the place to go to buy stuff online. Den Decor Depot says, I'm sure the new listings are part of the shareholder package. Look, sellers put up 11 billion new listings this quarter. It has to be incentivized by the search bump. Okay, tinfoil hat off. I don't disagree with that at all, really. What was it we were talking about the other day? Something similar that we were looking at it and saying this is a ploy to increase gross merchandise volume without actually having to do anything. It was the auction bid increment thing that I talked about on Monday's show. If you change the bid increment on a low priced item from 5 cents to $1, it takes one bidder to make an extra 95 cents in gross merchandise volume for eBay on that item. And you multiply that by the tens of thousands of auction items on any given day, that could be a pretty significant bump. All of these things are For me, they're attempts to work around the fact that they haven't figured out, and this is true of all the sites, how to increase their business. We've kind of reached that plateau. I've mentioned before, the notion of perpetual growth, that these firms are always going to be able to generate more and more buyers, more income, more sales, more revenue, more. Our whole capitalist society is based on it, is probably not accurate. There comes a point where you kind of reach a ceiling. Now, the fact that some of these sites are down from their ceiling indicates that there is some headroom there for growth, but they're not. None of them appear to be trying to find a way to do it organically through actually attracting more buyers and/or sellers. They're trying to extract additional profit and income out of existing items that are already selling, and I'm not sure, frankly, how sustainable that is, because as we talked about a few weeks ago, sellers have had about enough of the extra fees and having to pay promoted fees and jump through all these hoops and pay additional money to get things done that arguably are the platform's sole reason for existence to begin with. I'll take my tinfoil hat out off now as well. When did you last do a stock take? I really don't, to be fair. I will randomly, every now and then, if I'm in a box, I'll pull up an item just to see if it's there. But as I mentioned, I'm consistently on a day-to-day basis tracking my active listing number. So if I'm, again, 11,300, I list 10 and I sell 5, I know I should be 11,305 at the end of the day. And that number has consistently tracked over time to indicate to me that I can't say with any certainty that there's not an item or two out of my 11,000 that maybe has been lost to eBay's ether, but I've never found that item on the random chances that I've checked, and my numbers indicate that that is in fact correct, because I'm looking at it pretty much every day to make sure that those numbers, the math lines up. And it, for me, the February issue notwithstanding, where you got a couple days there where listing numbers are out of whack, has always been spot on. Mel says the planner is nice because I can see the listing sales correlation over time to cross-check with my sales numbers. Yeah, it gives you one more way to check that what you think you're doing is what you're actually doing, and that it matches what's going on. And you start to see, if I take a day or two off a listing, do my sales drop? That indicates that I need to be consistently listing. That's been my experience. Again, nobody really knows, probably eBay doesn't even really know how that algorithm really works. But anecdotally, it seems like if I go a couple of days without my normal pattern of listings, that I see my views and my sales start to decline. If I'm consistently doing 15, 20, 25 listings a day through the week, things seem to be absolutely fine. But if I drop off that number for any reason, I take a 3-day weekend, I do something and I don't do any listing, I've got a couple days at the start of the next week where things are a little bit soft until I get back on track. So yeah, having that tracker and being able to correlate that to what's going on with your business can be super important. Ryan M. Dreyer, I've never had anything deleted, had multiple items that are several years old, not on sale, nothing special. So again, there you go. Multiple sellers with completely different experiences, all on the same platform. How does that happen? I need a tech wizard from eBay to come on the show and see if they can explain why in virtually anything with eBay, sellers have different experiences. They have different views on the page. We don't all see the same thing at the same time. eBay rolls out things in phases. They test things with some sellers and not others. It makes it so hard, as I said, to know as a seller what you should do in terms of listings, in terms of running promotions, in terms of running sales, because there's no clear path. Because what I'm doing that is working for me clearly is not working in the same way for Don, the auction professor, who's having a completely different experience with older listings and has to resort to ending and selling similar to feel confident that his listings are not disappearing after a couple of years. Mel says, Big Gray, I have to use a cross lister as one person, but I think that will help your error prevention for a bit. You can always pick up. Yeah. The more, the more you have to touch an item and you're, doing that all hands on, the more likely you are potentially to catch a mistake than if you have it all automated through a cross lister. So Big Gray says he will check it out. Just sold a big Briggs and Stratton parts and service catalog 10-pound binder for $22 plus shipping. As I talk about in my What Sold segments all the time, these old owner's manuals, you think they're not going to be worth anything. Sometimes even there'd be 5-6 pages, something that came with a blender or, a toaster. And you go to an estate sale and there's a whole box because this person collected and kept every owner's manual for every item they ever had dating back to the 1950s. A lot of times you can get that whole box. There might be 100 of them in there for $5. You got next to nothing in them. And, they sell for 8, 10, 12, 22 bucks plus shipping. It's not in everybody's wheelhouse. That's not something every seller would want to do based on their time or their business model. But man, for me, I love finding those things. I did. You may recall a couple of years ago, I had a whole run. I mean, it was months worth. I was at an estate sale, and this guy had boxes of Schwinn bicycle catalogs dating back to like the 1960s. And there were 2 or 3 boxes of them. There were well over 100 in these boxes. And I went up and asked the person, what are you wanting for these boxes of these Schwinn catalogs? They said, I don't know, make me an offer. I said, would you take $5? I'll take them all and I'll get them out of here. And they were like, yes, perfect. We'll do it. And I was selling some of those books for $25, $30 a piece. I mean, obviously you've got some time invested in taking 100 Schwinn bicycle catalogs and listing them. That's what I do for a living. I got nothing but time. They can be a gold mine because the estate sellers, they don't want to deal with them. And most people just see them and they're like, they're junk. They're just old catalogs or old owner's manuals or user's manuals. I just sold a bunch of 1990s era Sound Blaster user guides. They were in a box, hat tip to Aaron, Rebel Junk, who had me come up and pick up a bunch of boxes of books. There were 4 or 5 1993 and 1994 era Sound Blaster user manuals, one for a CD-ROM drive, one for a sound card, one for something else, a fax card. I listed them all for like $8 a piece plus shipping, and I've sold. I think there were 5 total. I've sold 4 of the 5 already, from free to $7 or $8 a piece. Those are deals I'll take all day. Mel says, to Pamela Reeves, I use a lot of poly bags and have found 16 10 by 1 over a pound is a huge saver with pirate ship. Yeah, that box in a bag to get that cubic rate is fantastic. Big Dre says, I'm stubborn about using boxes, but my wife will veto my boxes and use bags often. Again, for lower priced items, I swear by the bubble mailers. I've talked about that process before. I will wrap everything in plain newsprint, drop it in a bubble mailer, and my feedback is consistently that it's the best packaging job they've ever seen. I had one that said it's like unwrapping a Christmas present when I get something from this seller. I mean, they are twice maybe out of all those shipments, I've had something that arrived damaged. They're just fantastic, and they save you money up front because the bubble mailers are cheap. I just ordered, I don't know, maybe 1,000 this morning, maybe more than that, of different sizes. I use multiple sizes of bubble mailers for like $390. So they average to less than 40 cents a piece. You can't buy many boxes for that kind of price. Boxes are more expensive and they end up being heavier. Often shipping something in a poly mailer or a bubble mailer will keep you at a 1 pound lower rate than using a box. That adds up for you and or for the buyer as well. So I swear by them. Again, unless it's a super expensive item, got to do it. eBay shipping, you have to put in 1 inch in the 3rd dimension to get a true cubic rate. There you go. Mel flips it. That's why I use pirate ship for cubic rate if I can shove it into a bag. That is the big advantage over there. Cubic rates are commercial only. Playroom. So you must not sell on Poshmark at all. If you're referring to me, I do not. Would love to hand my poor mail people a scan sheet instead of dozens of individual packages to scan, but Poshmark doesn't have the option to ship pirate ship. Yeah, that's captive shipping. It's like Whatnot, if I'm not mistaken. You've got to use their whatever their shipping methods is. I'm surprised they don't offer a scan sheet tool though. That seems like a no-brainer for people that are selling multiple items that you would want that. Mel says, I've used SKUs on the phone, but don't have that many orders for Posh. I wonder if there's a way to print those SKUs. Den Decor says, thank you for the time. Time to sell. Have a great day. Yeah, we are. We're well over an hour here. So we'll get through these last comments and then we'll call it a day. I appreciate, as always, everybody coming out and sharing with each other and listening to my rants. How much is it to ship a 16 by 10 by 1 under 1 pound with pirate ship? Ground advantage, it would depend on the zone. That would be really hard to say. Mel would probably have a pretty good idea because she's clear out on the West Coast. So, but it's quite a bit cheaper than a box. Mel says, I don't know the amount that I use eBay. If it's under a pound, I haven't noticed a difference with pirate ship when I checked. It will vary a little bit depending on the zone that you're shipping to and from. Mel says, wait, new listings as part of a shareholder package. So that is why sell and relist so well. New listings make the platform look better. Can you summarize? Because I'm not a retail mindset. So I think one of the metrics that they measure is beyond the seller count, which they have not divulged actually in several years on eBay. But in addition to sales, they talk about how many active listings they have. They talk about how many of those are promoted. If you get this influx of new listings, now for my money, that number's probably also relatively flat because people are just unlisting and relisting existing items, and so many people are doing it that I'm not sure it actually probably gives them a huge lift. But if everybody did it, they would get a short-term bump of what would look like an influx of new merchandise that's not actually new. It's old listings that have been removed and then relisted, and they don't, as far as I know, talk about how many listings have been ended or canceled without a sale. They would simply be talking about new listings, and those would be metrics that a potential investor would look at and say, well, they're doing more. They've gotten more new listings than they had last quarter. Business must be growing. The fact that they don't divulge active seller count probably puts the lie to that, because you've got sellers like myself that are listing thousands of items over the course of a year, and other smaller sellers who are only listing one or two. So Cameron, hello. Not smart squeeze sellers when they now have other options. Yeah, and it's one of the things I talk about with why I want Mercari to succeed. Lower fees, another outlet for buyers and sellers. It would be fantastic if that platform took some of eBay's lunch. But eBay clearly doesn't have a plan or a path at the present time to grow their business organically. So they just they raised the minimum amount of promoted rate quietly to 5%. I think it was doubled the offsite promoted fee. It just, at every turn, they're trying to squeeze more and more profit out of a finite bunch of money, all of which would serve to dissuade potential new sellers, because you go on any message board, any Facebook group, and look at the comments from most eBay sellers, and the big complaint is the fees and the promotions that are required. And if I'm a new seller and I look at Mercari, add a flat 10% to the seller, and then I look at eBay, and you got sellers like myself that are saying my average over the course of a year is 20%, to include the regular fees plus the promoted fee that I pay on that 60%. I'm paying on average anywhere from 20 to 21% in fees. Why would I list on eBay if I could list on Mercari? Now, to be fair, that's short-sighted, because eBay is doing, in my case, almost 10 times the business that Mercari is doing. So there is an advantage. I don't mind to pay that extra to capitalize on the size of their audience. You could make the same argument for Amazon, who a lot of sellers are complaining about not only the fees, but the way they do business with their third-party sellers. But it's the biggest marketplace on the planet. Many sellers will take that and go there. But yes, it is. Sellers do have more options. You don't have as good of an option, but you certainly have more of them, and in many cases, less expensive ones. Dendicor Depot says, eBay wants constant fresh inventory, so sellers get the new listing bump in search as a reward. Shareholders are told of X dollars of new inventory is added per X amount of time. It satisfies both. Yes, sir. Miss Lachey says, I follow a store that only sells sales manuals. They, however, don't clearly disclose they will be sending a copy. Yeah, I've seen that. I see there are some that do clearly list, and I've seen this sometimes with books too, that the book is it's a PDF or it's a reprint. It's not the actual original book. I guess in the case of an owner's manual, there are probably two types of buyers. The one who found the old toaster or whatever it is at an estate sale or a garage sale, and they just want a manual. They don't care about whether it's the original or whether it's a copy or a PDF. And there are people who collect the strangest things who want old vintage manuals. So Recommerce Dave asks, do you revisit your listings to check if pricing is competitive after a few months, or do you rely on the markdown program to move the stock? I will occasionally check my highest priced items. Anything I've got that's maybe over $100, I'll go back maybe once a month and look at those to make sure they're still kind of in the range of possibility. And then remember that particularly if they're older, I am going to have it on sale for what could be as little as 15 or as much as 60% off over the coming months, depending on how old it is. And I may make tweaks to the pricing, but by and large, I just rely on the markdown every month to account for the fact that these items, the floor may have moved on the price. Midget Gordon Ramsay says, sandwiching my books, magazines, pamphlets between a couple pieces of scrap cardboard inside a poly bag is my preference. Costs 4 cents and make me feel confident about the protection. And I've talked about that, especially on like paperbacks. I always do a cardboard stiffener in addition to that wrap to help make sure that it gets to its destination in good shape. Pamela Reeves says, shipping 1 pound from Miami to Palm Springs is $8.71. UPS Ground Advantage. eBay quoted $10. There you go. And I assume that is because of the cubic rate discount. So Pamela Reeves, Mel says, too, Pamela, right? But if you don't pass that discount on to the seller, you can keep the overage. Absolutely. I do not. On items that I ship by Ground Advantage or Priority, I do not pass along my discount, but 95% of my stuff goes by media mail anyway. Cameron says, I've seen a bunch of weird item eBay ads on Facebook. Not sure if that's especially directed to me because I'm weird. Yes, it is. I don't know you well enough to know whether you're weird or not, but obviously you've got two algorithms there that are working in tandem to try to surface to you items that both Facebook and eBay believe you would be interested in based on your search history, arguably on both of those platforms. So if you have searched for or looked up unusual items or unusual topics on Facebook and or on eBay, you probably are getting shown unusual things that the platform's algorithms think would be things based on your history would be good for you. There are obviously, with everything that's going on in the world, there's a lot of discussion about algorithms right now and whether they're helpful. They certainly are helpful from a marketing standpoint, but they reinforce things that you're already doing. I find that a lot of things get surfaced to me that are things that I have researched for my business that are not necessarily things I am interested in personally, but I'm getting fed those things on Facebook or on Instagram because I've done searches for those for something completely unrelated to anything I'm interested in personally. But yeah, I would guess that because of your activity on one or both of those platforms is probably why you're seeing uh, unusual items. Recommerce Dave, being a media seller, it's amazing how the market shifts on price and quantity of listings on a single title in a couple of months. I've found sell similar every few months forces me to check and recomp. Yep. Especially as more and more sellers get into it. I don't know. I don't know what the market is where you're at, but there's been a big resurgence of the sales of physical media, particularly CDs, recently here in the States. And yeah, you've got sellers that would never have messed with it before that are now getting in. And of course, everybody tries to outdo the previous listing. So if they see that the market is $5.99, they're probably trying $4.99 or $5.49 or something to undercut where the market is, and it ends up being a race, unfortunately, to the bottom. Pamela Reeves says to Mel, I quote, flat rate. The buyer paid $15. I know a lot of sellers that do flat rate shipping and are very successful at it. Shipping is so complicated. I'm so happy to be doing more books. Yes, shipping is the bane of resellers' existence, other than the platforms themselves, I guess I should say. But especially for new sellers, it's really difficult because size and weight both matter, and a lot of people are not aware of that, and it gets to be very, very complicated. We will make this the last comment for the day. We recently switched all our media mail shipments on Amazon to Ground Advantage because of metric dings on promised delivery dates. I had been reading that there's been a lot of issues with on Amazon with the promised dates and the delivery dates, and they want everybody to be in a situation where items are getting delivered within 1 to 3 days because that's their big thing. They want same day, next day delivery. And if you're doing media rate delivery, it could be even in the lower 48, it can be 5, 7, 8 days, which doesn't align with Amazon's goal to have everything delivered within 1 to 3 days. And they start digging you for it. Even if you've got your, and again, I don't sell there, but even if you've got your business plan, your specifics, whatever they call it, set up to allow for that extra time, they don't seem to be too interested in what you're trying to do. They only care about what they want, and you end up getting these service metric things, which is unfortunate. Well, my friends, thank you as always for coming out, sharing a little bit of time with me. Kaylee Debs, hello, coming into the chat late. Hope you're doing well. I am. This has been a very hopefully a very informative chat for everybody involved. If you missed some or all of it, please join Team Replay. Go back and watch it again. I think there's some helpful and useful stuff there. Again, thanks to everybody that came out today. Here we got one last one sneaking in here from Gordon Ramsay. My biggest gripe on Amazon is false promises on delivery date. I don't mind waiting 5 to 7 days. Just don't tell me it will show up in 2 and then not keep that promise. I've had that experience myself. I've ordered something that says same day delivery or next day delivery, and then it's 2 to 3 days. Operani says, I had to run up and downstairs getting packages packed, but what I gleaned was great as always. Well, good. I'm glad you're busy. That's awesome. Yes, you can watch the replay. It should be available immediately. As Recommerce Dave says, have a great day, everyone. For those of you who might be so inclined, I do have a Whatnot show tomorrow, Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern with 20 mostly vintage history books. If that's your jam, come see me tomorrow at 11 a.m. and then we will catch up next week. Next Wednesday, my plan is to have Max, Common Ground Finds, Paper Gold, both back on the show to talk about Whatnot and book selling on eBay. Until then, my friends, it's time to sell. Thanks, guys.